Good evening and welcome to another episode of Voices of ASEAN. My name is Beatrice and I'll be your host for today. Palm oil is the most widely used vegetable oil in the world today, making up 40% of global consumption. It can be found in almost anything we use in daily life, from food to household goods to even fuel. So when Indonesia, which accounts for 60% of palm oil production, announced that it was banning the export of palm oil, it sent shockwaves across global markets. One country which was particularly taken aback by the ban was India, which is the world's largest importer of edible oil, with palm oil making up more than 60% of its vegetable oil imports. Joining me today are three leading representatives from the Indian palm oil industry to tell us more about why palm oil is so vital to India and how the country's industry and market is proofing itself against future supply shocks. Mr. Atul Chaturvedi is the president of the Solvent Extractors Association, or simplified to SEA, of India, and he is also the chairman of Renuka Sugars. SEA is a primary vegetable oil association in India and has 875 members, including around 350 working solvent extraction plants with a combined oil cake, oil seed processing annual capacity of about 30 million tons. Our next guest is Mr. Dorab Mistry. He's a director at Goodrich International, a leading Indian conglomerate with operations in various industries, including oil palm plantations. He is also regarded as a leading expert in vegetable oils, with nearly 4 decades of experience in the vegetable oil trade. And last but not least, Mr. Sudhakar Desai, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, is the president of India Vegetable Oil Producers Association, or IVPA, and the CEO of Emami Agrotech Limited. IFPA is the APEC Association of Vegetable Oil Producers in India, while Emami Agrotech is one of the largest edible oil producers in India. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us today, and a good evening to all of you. So I have questions for all of you. The first few questions will be questions that's generally for all, and anyone is welcome to answer. And then I'll go specifically into individual questions for each of you. So the first question, which is a general question for all, is this. I've already given an introduction to each of you, and I hope I've done you justice, but it is always best to let people speak for themselves. So could you each tell our audience something about yourselves and your involvement in the palm oil industry in particular?
Who should start?
You should start, Mr.
Atul, you go.
Since you spoke first.
Okay. Thank you. My name is Atul Chaturvedi, and I've been associated with the vegetable oil industry for almost more than 4 decades, and for a fairly long time of almost something like 15 odd years, I was Adani Wilmar, which is now possibly considered as one of the most prized edible oil companies in this part of the world. And post my superannuation in 2017, I've been heading another sugar company, which is also one of the leading companies in the country, called Renuka Sugar. And incidentally, Renuka Sugar is owned by Wilmar. And Dorab, by sitting in this panel, is also a director on that company in Renuka Sugars. So, and I've been associated with edible oils, and now I also happen to wear the hat of president or chairman of Solvent Extractors Association, which is the apex body for the vegetable oil industry in the country. And our members are both in the crushing side as well as in the refining side, as well as in the port-based refineries as well. So we have a hang of practically the whole edible oil industry, plus the troubles with the edible oil industry today is going through.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Atul. And who's next?
Well, I can go next. I have worked all my life for the Godrej Group, which is one of India's largest conglomerates, extending from steel all the way to FMCG, consumer products, cooking oil, etc. My specialty is vegetable oil. Originally, I am a chartered accountant, but I have never done any accounting work in all my life, only done commodity trading. And from 1997, I've been speaking publicly about price outlook I've been rather lucky with some of the prognostications that I have made. And so I'm reasonably taken with a pinch of seriousness by the industry whenever I speak. Apart from my professional work full time at Godrej, I also have the honor of being invited to be non-executive director of the company that Atul Chaturvedi chairs, which is Sri Renuka Sugars, and also now India's largest vegetable oil conglomerate, which is Adani Wilmar Limited, which is half Wilmar and half Adani. And Adani, as you know, is now the up and coming big gorilla of the Indian industrial scene. So I am very grateful to God that He has put me in touch with such wonderful large conglomerates. Though I am afraid I am only an employee or a non-executive and not an owner. Over to you, Sudhakar.
Yes, thank you, Dhruv.
Thank you.
I'm Sudhakar Desai, and I've been fortunate enough to know Atul and Dhruv for, I think it looks like from my past life, maybe. So I think it's long enough. Before joining Imami, which is Imami Agrotech, which has now had a 10x growth in the last 8 years to reach about 2.5, $2.6 billion. Before that, I was working for founder director of Bunge India operations, edible oil and fats business. Before that, I was with ITC, which was later taken over by Conagra USA. So been with the industry like edible oils only, mostly and agri-related for over 30 years. And currently, Imami Agrotech is one of the prominent players, part of the Imami group, which is also known for the cosmetics and some of the powerful brands, hospitals and paper and other business, real estate, etc. And currently we import nearly about 1.3 million tons of palm oil,
Wow.
apart from all other oils in India.
Wow, fantastic. Gentlemen, India consumes around 21 million tons of edible oils a year, and over the last 2 years, imported around 13 million tons a year. Am I correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Of this, around, I think, 55 to 60% is palm oil, the bulk of which is imported from Malaysia. Now, what is it about Malaysian palm oil that makes it so attractive to buyers from India?
Durabha, you are taking this?
I think it's better if you take it first, Atul.
Okay.
You are the.
No, I think traditionally, India has been buying oil from Indonesia, and the ratio used to be 70-30, 70 from Indonesia and about 30% from Malaysia. But lately, in the last year or so, maybe a little more than that, this ratio has changed in favor of Malaysia because Indonesian are more keen now to sell only the refined oil, and the prices, which used to be much more competitive in the past, no longer were as competitive.
Oh,
And Malaysia was much more competitive and much more open to doing business with us, and much more easier to deal with. So that has probably turned Malaysia as a bigger supplier to India, and Indonesians' volumes were suffering big time.
despite what our
Now-
former Prime Minister once said, and we had a little bit of a thing then.
Yes, and the latest ban on palm oil out of Indonesia, that has also probably quailed the pitch quite a lot.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
Indians were totally taken aback.
Yes.
And this
yes.
has come quite handy. And in fact, it has helped Malaysia regain a lot of lost ground, which they had lost few years back.
Yeah.
And I think Malaysians are being now looked at as much more reliable suppliers.
Correct. So when the Indonesia announced this ban, at that point, how exposed was India to the export ban? I mean, how much was that sent shockwaves through India, and how was the reaction with all of you?
No, in fact, India was already on the back seat with Ukraine-Russia standoff and sunflower oil not coming into the country. And on top of this, Indonesians taking this extremely harsh step of banning palm oil into India, that actually sent massive shockwaves in the country. And India and the Indian politician and the Indian bureaucracy probably did not take it too kindly.
Yeah,
That is for sure.
that's true. So, gentlemen, I have a question for Atul. At first, Indonesia banned only the export of refined palm oil, but then expanded it to a ban on crude palm oil. How was the solvent extraction industry in India affected by the ban on the export of crude palm oil from Indonesia, and what measures were taken to address that?
So as far as the crushing industry in the country is concerned, they were not affected, but the refining industry at the port towns were definitely affected. And in fact, now soya and sunflower oil become the only oil for the port-based refineries, with the Indonesian ban coming in. And sunflower, in any case, was getting into trouble because of the standoff between Russia and Ukraine, and the shipment from that part of the world had totally collapsed. So definitely, India was in a bit of a soup. But having said that, Indians probably anticipated this kind of a scenario. India, in terms of quantity, was reasonably well covered. So it did not result in supply chain getting too disturbed. And in this, I must say the industry has been reasonably smart enough, and India has learned to live with much lower stock levels at the ports. And this is where, and gradually, as the ban extended to beyond a month or closer to a month, Indians started to learn to live without the Indonesian oil, because Malaysia and Thailand filled the gap to whatever extent possible.
Mr. Atul. Mr. Dorab, you recently called for the immediate resumption of palm oil exports from Indonesia, warning that, quote, if unrestricted exports do not start before the end of May, we foresee a situation where all storage tanks will be full and the industry will grind to a halt. The loser in all this will be the poor Indonesian farmer. How do you see the slow resumption of full palm oil trade from Indonesia affecting both Indian industries and importers, as well as the price of palm oil in general? Where do you see palm oil prices heading in the near future?
Well, first of all, let me say the banning of cooking oil and olein and CPO from Indonesia was, in my opinion, a huge mistake by the Indonesian government. They had a problem, a justifiable problem of supplies at controlled prices in the local market. But you don't solve your local problem by exporting it to your export customers. So that was a huge mistake. Now, I have a huge amount of respect for President Jokowi. I rate him as one of the two best leaders in Asia today. And he has done a wonderful job ruling Indonesia with fairness, with straightforward policies. But I believe in this particular case, he may have been misguided or he personally made a mistake. But being a clever man, he came back from his very successful trip to the United States, where he posed for a picture with President Biden, met Elon Musk, etc., etc. And he came back in a very good mood and he immediately lifted the ban. He listened to the representations that were made by the industry and the very genuine efforts that the industry made to supply oil into the local market. And he lifted the ban. But countries like India, Indonesia, we are all in the same boat. The decision making is quick, but the implementation takes too long. The bureaucracy moves slowly. Individual ministers vie with each other to gain credit or gain the ear of the leader, etc. So in all that mishmash, the implementation of the decision got postponed to almost indefinite. That is why I felt I should write and speak freely and frankly as a friend of the industry, as a friend of Indonesia and Malaysia, to lift the ban. I think something is being done as we speak today. I think something has been put into practice. The urgency with which they are acting is very impressive because they have divided the agenda into two parts. One up to the end of May, and one from the beginning of June. That means they are expecting shipments to start from tomorrow or Sunday. So I am very gratified by what I am hearing, and my great thanks to the Indonesian ministers concerned, who I know that when journalists approach them, took our representation seriously and have acted. So we are very grateful to the Indonesian government, our well-wishers in Indonesia, and we keep our fingers crossed that shipments will start from tomorrow or day after. How does that affect the market? Well, clearly, there was a little bit of speculation in the market, a little bit of what I would call taking advantage of someone else's difficulty, and prices were being ramped up. So I think that part of it, the market came down by a couple of hundred ringgits. But my view is that the prices are too high. And producers in Malaysia and Indonesia, both countries, not Indonesia alone, Malaysia also, they seem to think that the consumer in India, Pakistan, Bangladesh is a bottomless pot of gold and they can keep dipping into it all the time. No, it's not like that. These customers are price conscious and these are price elastic markets. And prices are too high and we have suffered enormous demand destruction. The producers have no clue as to how much demand has been lost. The whole of Africa, the whole of the Indian subcontinent, these are the major fast growing markets for palm oil. And we have virtually destroyed them by overcharging and putting up prices to these extent. So I think it is time for palm oil prices to come down to reasonable level. Reasonable level, in my opinion, I know costs of production have gone up. So a reasonable level, in my opinion, is about 4,000 ringgits. Today we are at 6,500. So there is huge scope for the prices to come down. And that's why I am perhaps alone in my bearishness in the market in saying that by June end, prices will come down to 5,000 and by end of September to 4,000. But I genuinely believe, because there are two things which are holding up the market. One is the Indonesian ban, which is now gradually being eased. And the second is the war in the Ukraine. And I don't think you can take a bet that the war in Ukraine will go on indefinitely. The day there is a ceasefire, the day there is a compromise, the day both sides sit together and arrive at some kind of a solution, the Black Sea will open. And when the Black Sea opens, 20 to 30 million tons of grain and 5 million tons of vegetable oil will flow out. That is the test when the world will see that there is enough supply and there is no need for these extremely high prices. I think I've spoken
High
too much
prices are
already.
because the high prices are basically people taking advantage of the shortage, or is it due to
I
something
would not
else?
go so far, but speculation is an integral part of commodity markets.
It's the
There is no
commodity
commodity
market.
market without speculation. So clearly that is a factor.
So it's not actually what's on the ground that's affecting it. It's the speculation in the commodities market.
Everything put together, but speculation does play a role.
I think so
Some
too.
role.
I think so too.
There was too much of free money also available in the system as well.
Yes.
Very low interest rates and the kind of money which was available. That was also probably driving the commodities up.
And no interest rates. It was free. Money
Absolutely.
was
Very,
free to
very
use.
low interest rates.
Okay. My next question is for Mr. Sudhakar. You said that the high price of imported vegetable oil is encouraging farmers in India to grow their own oilseeds, which is good. What do you see to be factors that are affecting the growth and uptake of locally grown edible oils in India, and how did the Indonesian export ban affect this?
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting question. Before going to the Indian response to the trigger that they've been provided on the prices, I think it's very, the high prices and the food inflation have caused various responses from the three main countries that we've been discussing, like India, Malaysia, and Indonesia. I think various people have responded very differently to the shifting focus across the value chain. India, for example, I think India put stock controls. They wanted to remove the speculation. They've removed the exchange. They've shut down the exchanges and various measures. The duties have been consistently reduced. But to go back to your original question, I think Malaysia today is only 30%, but import share in India. But currently it is Jan to now, it is on average of 60-70%. Because two things have happened. Malaysia never changed the export duties. They've been having 6 to 8% of duty. But whereas Indonesia has increased looking at the opportunity, and of course, looking at the opportunity driven by speculation and also the supply and demand factors, For example, for a while now, CPO duty is $575, which is nearly 25% of the price itself. And RBD Olin, which is the finished goods, the duty was only $408. So this has tilted the whole import basket from Indonesia to Malaysia, because India is full of refining capacity. I think both SEA and IVP definitely want the refining to be done in India, what we call make in India. The value addition needs to be done in India. But the differential duty structure imposed by Indonesia has made a lot of finished goods to come into India, which I think we've been representing to say that the Indian duty should reflect a mirror image of the Indonesian thing, because Indian interest is in getting the smooth supplies and encouraging the value addition within India itself. But in the other question of how Indonesian ban is affected, I think like Durabji just said, Indonesia artery was literally getting clogged. The refineries were full of oil because out of 4 million tons, they have to export 2 million tons. But if for a month, if they don't, the 2 million tons has to be stocked up somewhere. I think it is the millers who are not able to stock up because the FFB was. I think it's a welcome move. I think only today they've announced 1 million tons of exports, easing out some of the supply situation, and it's no brainer. I think Indonesia would need the Indian market and the world market as much as the world market needs the Indonesian palm oil, right? Now on the other question, I think high prices, while it is bad for the consumer globally, I think we see this phenomena not only in the developing countries but even in the developed countries. That is the only solution to solve the problem in the long run, because the high prices would encourage a supply trigger. I think we would see more of soybean oil production, more of sun oil production. Once it releases at these prices, we will have the more of probably palm oil production in Indonesia itself. Malaysia, of course, will have to, with the limited land availability, they will have to focus on hybrid variety to produce more. But so far India is concerned, I think it is a fantastic opportunity. There is an oil palm mission that has been announced. I think once taken seriously, in 5 to 7 years, there should be about 2.5 to 3 million tons of oil available domestically, substituting the imports. Then there is also national mission on oil seeds, which SCA also has been talking about. I think we also, as IVPA, presented a plan of action with nearly about 2.5, 2.6 billion to be spent over 3 years. India has got a wide variety of oils. Some are import non-substitutable, like mustard oil, for example, groundnut oil. We don't have imports to substitute it with. So I think once the national mission on oilseed is there, there can be short-term results in the groundnut cultivation. Probably sunflower. India was producing a lot of sunflower oil sometime back. Time to revamp it. I think at a price, all of this should happen, and this is an opportunity, if seen properly,
Palm oil
for
is
India to develop.
how much palm oil is planted in India? I'm sure there are
Uh,
some areas in India which is conducive
Very little.
for
It's
planting.
about 300,000 acres, producing about, let's say, 2.5 to 300,000 tons of palm oil. But there is a scope. I mean, way back in a decade ago, it has been identified that 1.2 to 1.5 million hectares can be made available all across. May not be with the same yields like Indonesia, advanced countries like Malaysia and Indonesia, but even at lower yields, I think once the regulatory, the government support, the capital from industry is taken care, and it's socially and economically viable thing. So I think in about, it's slightly long drawn though, while the other oil seed that I mentioned can be a quick winner for increasing supplies at this time, because India has exposed itself to the vulnerable situation that one ban and one country crisis can affect. No longer these are internal policies, a policy in Indonesia, a policy in Malaysia, a policy in Russia, can affect the core of the business and also the food security issues in a hugely dependent, import dependent country like India, right?
So it's
So
it's
these are the
accelerating your
issues.
independence to
Yeah.
to have food
Last but not the
security.
least, I do believe behind every policy measure, there is a pushing supply and demand factors which trigger such a policy. And number two, high prices will attract government attention. And as we saw and learned from the Indonesian example, I think at a situation like this, it will tend to be a little bit of trial and error because you try to do something, it backfires. Consumer prices, instead of going down, will start going up if you do something dramatically different. But the thing is, like Gaurav also mentioned, I think it's a quick reaction and correction of such measures that have been happening here. Even not to speak about sun oil and soybean oil situation. As far as palm is concerned, I think things are getting to normal. India has managed very well with the good mustard crop, so we didn't feel the pinch. And now that the imports are resuming from Indonesia, I think supply situation will ease out.
Fantastic. That's really good
To
news.
add to what Sudhakar said,
Mhm.
I think this Indonesian ban
Mhm.
will ultimately be negative for palm in the long run because Indian policy makers have now introduced TRQ, which means practically zero duty for soya and sun oil,
Mhm.
and palm oil duty remains unchanged. So that is going to be negative palm oil imports into the country because palm is going to be that much more expensive. And I think the Indian policymakers want to give a message to Indonesia that you can't bulldoze us just like this. But willy-nilly, this message will also go to Malaysia because palm oil from Malaysia is also going to come. So palm oil is going to be the sufferer, at least in the short run. And palm prices will have to come back to gain competitiveness and gain the market share. As I told right in the beginning, India was gradually learning to live without Indonesian palm oil.
So my final question is for all of you, and feel free to answer it together or one after another. Indonesia lifted the ban on palm oil exports effective 23rd May. However, exports have yet to go back to normal, nor is there any indication that they will not impose a sudden ban again if circumstances change. On that point, how did this scenario change the perception by India's palm oil industry of Indonesia as a reliable supplier? I know you've said a little bit here and there, but I thought maybe we could recap this.
Why is the right person to answer this?
You see, India has been in this game of importing vegetable oil for the last 40 years. And during the last 40 years, all the countries who export to India have played some trick or the other, some time or the other, depending upon their local compulsions. So India went through a period when we were not very happy with Malaysia, for example, as you yourself mentioned. At that time, Indonesia was extra friendly towards us. Now, Indonesia has done something stupid and Malaysia has become more friendly. I think what Atul said was absolutely right. The TRQ policy enunciated by the Indian government last week was, in my opinion, a bit of a masterstroke because it sent a message to Indonesia and it also sent a thank you message to Argentina because during our time of extreme dire need with the ban in Indonesia, India was importing huge quantities of soybean oil and even some quantity of sunflower oil, which we had stopped buying from Argentina. We were buying it from the Black Sea. But we started buying, Sudhakar, am I right, about 50 to 60,000 tons a month from
Yes.
Argentina. So this was a little thank you message to Argentina, I feel, that in our hour of need, you did not jack up prices, you did not put restrictions, you in fact encouraged the flow of oil to India. So I think the Indian government played its cards very well. I normally am, as Atul knows, I am not a great fan of the Indian government and I criticize them left and right. But in this case, I think they played an absolute blinder. And the message went out. I think it is having its necessary effect. And we must hope that Malaysia and Indonesia are India's natural friends and allies. If you see the cultural ties between our countries, the empathy, the sympathy, the overlap, there is so much going for our countries. But still, we try and pull each other's legs. So I wish politicians don't do that and take the larger interests of the entire Asian community, because it's a win-win situation if that is the case.
Also, for us, even for us, it's a mystery. Why? What do you think would have made Indonesia do this checkmate upon itself? I mean, even if it's temporarily, what would have possessed them? Does anyone have
Remember,
any idea?
Indonesia, like India, like Malaysia, is a vibrant democracy. And in vibrant democracies, sometimes politicians make mistakes. You have to be charitable and forgive them for their judgment. It may be right, it may be wrong. History may judge. But on that day, I'm sure President Jokowi felt compelled to do something, and he had his own reasons. So I dare not say too much about it. It's very easy for me to sit outside. I sit in London, very far away, and pronounce judgment on all these political actions. But maybe there are local compulsions. He felt compelled. As I said, he's a very fine leader. Indonesia is lucky to have him as president. I don't say that lightly. He's probably one of the two top best leaders in Asia today. So, but he made this judgment. We have to respect it. And I'm very glad that he is now taking steps to unravel it and expedite the flow of product, which is very important.
I totally agree with what Doraba is saying. But at the end of the day, when you analyze this decision, it seems as if they've shot themselves in the foot. Their loss of revenue, almost foreign exchange, something like $400 million.
It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. It's like a knee-jerk reaction, but it doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense, and their tanks are full. They've created mess for consuming countries, and it has not helped their own country as well. Markets, they were targeting a level of about 14,000 rupiah per kg or something like that. Market has actually not come down to that level. And my limited experience tells me all these fiats to bring down the price to this level or that level, at the end of the day, does not work in reality. You cannot keep anything down artificially. It has to be in the natural course. If internationally you were selling the oil at, say, $1,800, how do you expect the same damn thing to be selling in your country at $1,200, $1,100? It's largely unthinkable.
You hit the nail on the head. It's very artificial, this whole price raising. It's very artificial. So the question is, where does it all come from? And that's the mind-boggling thing. What's causing this? But you hit the nail on the head. I just came from our ministry and I said the same word. It seems very artificial, all this price rising, but what's the cause? Nobody seems to have a real answer for that.
I just want to add a couple of things. You see, the ban would mean actually you are stocking up, and your need to export is going to increase. But I find it fascinating because the cost of achieving the domestic target price, which is 14,000 rupiah, which is equivalent of 74 rupees in India. Remember, in India, the price is 150 rupees. So in Indonesia, the price is 74 rupees equivalent, and the cost of achieving that, even if the money were to be given, of course, Indonesia does not have a PDS, public distribution system, like India. It would have costed hardly about $80 million per month. And Indonesia is also running a biofuel program, which has to be subsidized by $200, and it would cost, at the rate of 700,000 tons of exports of biofuel, biofuel usage, it would cost about $140 million. But the current duties of Indonesia, the loss of treasury income to Indonesia, 2 million tons being per month exports, the treasury is incurring a $1 billion of loss. So if you put these mathematics together, it is definitely not in the interest of the Indonesian government to continue this ban forever like this. I think it is bound to release definitely, because economically this is what it makes sense, and hopefully they are achieving their objective of supplying at the price at which they have targeted, for whatever reasons. But the irony is, you have a country which is hugely surplus, which needs India so much badly, and there is a huge export revenue that they were missing, and they also have a huge environmental friendly policy of biofuel. 8 million tons is not small. I mean, as much as India is buying, that much of oil is going into the biofuel making in Indonesia. So it was a clever move to increase the value of the Indonesian produce, thereby the palm oil produced value, consequent of their dependency on the crude oil or whatever. But I think I look at this as interdependency in the global trade. I think India needs, Indonesia needs, and Malaysia, meanwhile, got very tight. So my only concern would be that Malaysia also should ramp up and find ways of increasing the production. Otherwise, eventually, it will become only Indonesia. And thankfully, now we realize that Thailand and other countries are also coming up in a big way with palm oil. And like all of us are trying to voice that at these prices, there will be a shift away of consumption. Two things are happening. Consumption per se is dropping because of very high prices, and the consumption is shifting to multiple oils. Some will go to soya, some will go to sun, some will go to domestic oils like rapeseed and groundnut. I think we have an interesting phase happening. At the center of which is the consumer of India.
Very well said, Mr. Sudhakar. I think that was a great session. Is there anything else you gentlemen would like to add?
I just want to add one thing. You said during the course of your this thing that India is currently importing something like 13 million tons of edible oils, right? It's a fact. India is importing 13 million tons of oil, but you must remember that in 2019 we actually imported 15 million tons of oil. And in the natural course, the increase should have been about 2 million tons more. So India at this point should have been importing something like 17 million tons. As against that, we are importing only 13 million tons. So effectively, our demand is contracting, and high prices are definitely not helping this. Yeah, back to you.
And just add the last to add to what Tulji was saying. India is definitely reduced. Instead of increasing at 2 million tons of consumption, it has actually gone down by 2 million tons of consumption. That's a divergence of 4 million, not small. And similarly, we hear China has dropped palm oil imports, and the overall consumption drop is huge. I mean, if India and China are on the downtrend as far as the consumption is concerned, and also have learned to live with a very minimal thin line, just-in-time supply chain, I think that is also very, very important factor in the price discovery, especially palm oil. Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Sudhakar. Mr. Dorab, anything else to add?
No, I think you made us talk too much. We need to keep our mouths shut because we need visas to go to Indonesia next time.
And Malaysia too. Well, thank you, gentlemen. Thank you so much. It was really great hearing you guys, and you had so much information, a wealth of information to share with us and our readers and our viewers. Thank you for it. Follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and our website to keep up to date with our upcoming shows. Voice of ASEAN thanks you for your time, and we'll be uploading a recorded version of this dialogue in our portal for those who missed it. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nimalaji. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.